The fluorescent lights in Dr. Patricia Morgan's office cast an unforgiving glare across the cream-colored walls as David Thompson sat rigidly in the uncomfortable chair, watching his wife Lisa fidget with her wedding ring. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. For the past 45 minutes, she had been painting him as the villain in their marriage story. Her voice trembling with practiced emotion as she described feeling emotionally abandoned and completely disconnected from the man she once loved. The therapist nodded sympathetically, occasionally glancing at David with the kind of look reserved for particularly stubborn patients who refused to acknowledge their obvious flaws. What neither of them knew was that David had spent the previous 3 weeks installing hidden cameras throughout their Sunset Hills home, documenting every secret phone call, every whispered conversation, and every passionate encounter Lisa had been having with Kevin Walsh, her personal trainer turned much more. The manila folder tucked discreetly under his arm contained photographs, text message transcripts, financial records showing mysterious expenditures, and a timeline that would make any prosecutor proud. But David sat quietly, letting Lisa weave her elaborate narrative of marital dissatisfaction, occasionally offering the kind of weak apologies that seemed to satisfy both women in the room. Dr. Morgan leaned forward, her silver-framed glasses catching the light as she prepared to deliver what was clearly meant to be a profound observation about their relationship dynamics. Lisa had been setting this up for weeks, these therapy sessions designed to establish a paper trail of David's supposed emotional neglect and mental instability. She needed documentation for the divorce proceedings she was secretly planning, evidence that would paint her as the long-suffering wife who tried everything to save their marriage before finally giving up on her unreasonable husband. The irony wasn't lost on David that his wife of 8 years was using couples therapy as a weapon against him, all while maintaining her affair with a man who had been charging premium rates for private training sessions that had nothing to do with fitness. Kevin Walsh, with his perfect smile and carefully sculpted physique, had no idea that his wealthy client's husband was a former private investigator who had spent 2 decades learning how to uncover the truth that people desperately wanted to keep hidden. David had met Lisa Rodriguez 9 years ago at a charity gala in downtown Phoenix, where she was working as an event coordinator for one of the city's most prestigious social planning companies. She had been stunning in her black evening gown, gracefully managing the chaos of a 500-person fundraiser while somehow making it look effortless. Her laugh had been genuine then, not the calculated performance it had become in recent months, and when she smiled at him across the crowded ballroom, David felt something he hadn't experienced since his divorce from his college sweetheart 15 years earlier. Their courtship had been a whirlwind of romantic dinners at Antonio's Italian, weekend getaways to Sedona, and long conversations about building a life together that would be different from the shallow relationships they had both endured in the past. Lisa spoke passionately about wanting authenticity in her life, about finding someone who would be her partner in every sense of the word, someone who wouldn't try to change her or control her the way her previous boyfriends had attempted to do. David had been completely captivated by her intelligence, her ambition, and what seemed like her genuine desire for a real connection. He was 34 then, established in his private investigation business, financially secure, and ready to settle down with someone who shared his values about loyalty, honesty, and mutual respect. Lisa appeared to be everything he had been searching for, and when he proposed to her on the anniversary of their first meeting, her tears of joy seemed absolutely authentic. The first 3 years of their marriage had been genuinely happy, or at least David had believed they were. They bought the house in Sunset Hills together, a beautiful 4-bedroom colonial with a swimming pool and mountain views that Lisa had fallen in love with the moment they walked through the front door. She quit her job at the event planning company to start her own business, and David supported her completely, both emotionally and financially, as she built her client base and established herself as one of Phoenix's most sought-after wedding planners. Lisa had always been social, always surrounded by friends and colleagues who adored her vivacious personality and seemingly boundless energy. David, who was more introverted by nature, had been content to let her be the center of attention at parties and gatherings, proud to be married to someone so charismatic and successful. He never questioned the late nights she spent working on elaborate wedding preparations, never doubted her explanations about difficult clients who demanded constant attention. never suspected that her growing distance from him might be connected to growing closeness with someone else. The changes had been subtle at first, the kind of gradual shift that happens so slowly you don't notice until you step back and realize everything is different. Lisa started working out more frequently, claiming she needed to stay in shape for the physical demands of her job, hauling decorations and managing long days on her feet during wedding ceremonies. She hired Kevin Walsh as her personal trainer, explaining that she needed someone who understood the specific fitness requirements of her profession and could work around her irregular schedule. David had actually encouraged the decision, worried about the stress Lisa seemed to be carrying, and hoping that regular exercise might help her sleep better and feel more energetic. Kevin came highly recommended from several of Lisa's wealthy clients, women who praised his professionalism and his ability to deliver real results without the intimidating atmosphere of a traditional gym. He was expensive, but David never questioned the cost, happy to invest in his wife's health and well-being. The home gym they installed for Lisa's training sessions had seemed like a practical solution to her scheduling challenges. Kevin would come to the house 3 times a week, bringing his own equipment and turning their spare bedroom into a professional fitness space. David was usually at work during these sessions, but on the few occasions when he had been home, Kevin had seemed pleasant enough, professional and focused on Lisa's fitness goals. What David hadn't realized was that the fitness sessions had evolved into something entirely different, that the man he was paying $300 a week was providing services that had nothing to do with physical exercise. The discovery had come accidentally, through a phone call David had overheard, while Lisa was supposedly taking a shower after one of her training sessions. The voice on the other end had been unmistakably Kevin's, and the conversation had been unmistakably intimate. The investigation that followed had been both professionally methodical and personally devastating. David used every skill he had developed during 20 years of uncovering infidelity, financial fraud, and corporate espionage, but this time the target was his own wife, and every piece of evidence felt like a knife twisting in his chest. The cameras he installed captured conversations that revealed not just the physical affair, but the emotional betrayal that cut even deeper. Lisa and Kevin weren't just having sex in David's home. In the bed he shared with his wife, using the gym, equipment he had purchased for her fitness. They were planning a future together, discussing how to maximize Lisa's divorce settlement, strategizing about the best way to present David as an emotionally abusive husband who had driven his wife into the arms of another man through years of neglect and psychological manipulation. The couple's therapy sessions were part of their strategy, a way to create documented evidence of David's supposed mental health issues and inability to communicate effectively in their relationship. Lisa had researched Dr. Patricia Morgan carefully, choosing a therapist known for her feminist approach to marriage counseling and her willingness to advocate for women she believed were trapped in toxic relationships. Each session followed the same pattern. Lisa would arrive early, spending time alone with Dr. Morgan to share her version of their relationship history, painting David as controlling, emotionally distant, and possibly suffering from depression or anxiety that made him difficult to live with. When David joined them, he was already at a disadvantage, facing 2 women who had been primed to see his every word and gesture through the lens of Lisa's carefully constructed narrative. Dr. Morgan would ask leading questions designed to elicit responses that could be interpreted as problematic, pushing David to admit to behaviors that could later be characterized as emotionally abusive or mentally unstable. Lisa would sit quietly, occasionally dabbing her eyes with tissues she always brought to the sessions, playing the role of the patient, long-suffering wife who had tried everything to save her marriage. David had played along for 3 weeks, appearing to be the confused, defensive husband who couldn't understand why his wife was so unhappy, despite his best efforts to provide for her and make their marriage work. He answered, "Doctor, preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us now. Back to the story." Morgan's questions honestly admitted to the communication problems Lisa described, and even agreed to consider individual therapy to address what they portrayed as his contribution to their marital problems. What neither Lisa nor Dr. Morgan realized was that David was building his own case, documenting every session, every leading question, every moment when the therapist seemed to abandon professional neutrality in favor of advocating for Lisa's position. The recording device hidden in his jacket captured every word, while his trained eye noted every detail that would later be useful in court proceedings. The financial records he had uncovered told their own story about Lisa's preparations for divorce. She had been systematically moving money from their joint accounts into a personal account David hadn't known existed, small amounts that wouldn't be immediately noticed but that added up to nearly $40,000 over the past 6 months. She had also been meeting with divorce attorneys, shopping for someone who would be aggressive in pursuing the largest possible settlement while portraying David as the kind of husband who deserved to lose everything. Kevin Walsh's role in this scheme went beyond being Lisa's lover. He was also her accomplice in documenting supposed evidence of David's instability, taking photographs of Lisa with bruises she claimed came from David's physical aggression, though David's hidden cameras showed they were actually the result of particularly enthusiastic encounters between Lisa and Kevin himself. The personal trainer had apparently done this before, using his access to wealthy married women to orchestrate elaborate divorce schemes that left him financially rewarded for his participation. As David sat in Dr. Morgan's office for what would be their 4th and final session, listening to Lisa describe her fear that their marriage was beyond saving, he felt a cold calm settle over him that he recognized from his most challenging professional cases. This was the moment when all the pieces came together, when months of careful investigation were about to be revealed, when the people who thought they were manipulating him were about to discover exactly how thoroughly they had underestimated their target. Lisa was building toward her grand finale, the emotional breakdown that would convince Dr. Morgan that she had no choice but to leave her marriage and start over with someone who could give her the love and respect she deserved. Her voice was trembling as she described feeling like she was walking on eggshells around David, never knowing what might trigger one of his moods or cause him to withdraw even further from their relationship. Dr. Morgan was nodding sympathetically, preparing to offer the kind of validation that would give Lisa everything she needed for her divorce proceedings. The session was following the exact script they had rehearsed, building toward the moment when Lisa would tearfully announce that she couldn't continue living in such an emotionally toxic environment and needed time apart to heal from the damage David had caused. David checked his watch and smiled slightly, knowing that in exactly 10 minutes, Amanda Foster would be arriving for an appointment that would change everything. His lawyer had been briefed on every detail of Lisa's scheme, every piece of evidence David had collected, every law that had been broken in the process of setting him up for financial and emotional destruction. The manila folder under David's arm contained copies of everything Amanda would need to not only defend him in divorce proceedings, but to pursue criminal charges against both Lisa and Kevin for fraud, extortion, and conspiracy. The recordings from the therapy sessions would demonstrate how Dr. Morgan had abandoned professional ethics in favor of advocating for Lisa's position, while the hidden camera footage would prove that everything Lisa had told the therapist about their marriage was a carefully constructed lie. As Lisa reached the climax of her performance, describing through tears how she had tried everything to save their marriage but couldn't continue sacrificing her mental health for a relationship that was destroying her, David found himself almost admiring the thoroughness of her deception. She had thought of everything, planned every detail, anticipated every challenge, except the one that was about to walk through Dr. Morgan's door and expose the entire elaborate scheme. The knock on the office door came exactly on schedule, and David felt a surge of satisfaction as he watched confusion replace confidence on Lisa's face. Dr. Morgan frowned, checking her appointment book and clearly not expecting any interruption to their session. Lisa's hand instinctively went to her phone, as if she might need to call Kevin and warn him that something unexpected was happening. David stood up slowly, straightening his tie and picking up the manila folder that would change everything. After 3 weeks of playing the confused, defensive husband, he was about to reveal exactly who he had always been, and Lisa was about to discover that she had chosen the worst possible target for her elaborate scheme of betrayal and fraud. Amanda Foster stepped into Dr. Morgan's office with the kind of confidence that comes from 25 years of practicing family law in Phoenix's most contentious divorce cases. Her tailored navy suit and leather briefcase immediately commanded attention, and the way she surveyed the room suggested someone accustomed to taking control of difficult situations. David had chosen his attorney carefully, knowing that Amanda's reputation for thoroughness and her unwillingness to back down from a fight would be exactly what he needed for what was about to unfold. Dr. Morgan stood up awkwardly, clearly flustered by the unexpected interruption to what she had assumed would be a routine therapy session. Lisa remained frozen in her chair, her carefully orchestrated emotional performance forgotten as she stared at the stranger who had just walked into what should have been a private moment between her, David, and their therapist. The tissue she had been clutching fell from her hand as the reality of the situation began to dawn on her. "I'm sorry, but we're in the middle of a private session," Dr. Morgan began, her professional composure wavering as she tried to regain control of her office. "I think there's been some mistake. We weren't expecting anyone else today." Amanda smiled politely and opened her briefcase, removing a thick legal folder that she placed on the small table between the chairs. "There's no mistake, Dr. Morgan. I'm Amanda Foster, Mr. Thompson's attorney, and I'm here because my client invited me to join today's session. I believe he has some important information to share that will require legal documentation." The color drained from Lisa's face as the implications of Amanda's presence began to register. This wasn't part of the plan she and Kevin had so carefully constructed. Their scheme had depended on David remaining the confused, manipulated husband, who would passively accept whatever narrative Lisa presented about their marriage. The presence of a lawyer suggested that David knew far more than he had been letting on, and Lisa's mind raced as she tried to figure out exactly how much their deception had been exposed. David opened his manila folder and pulled out a stack of photographs, placing them face down on the coffee table where everyone could see them. His movements were deliberate and calm, a stark contrast to the panicked energy he had displayed during the previous 3 therapy sessions. When he spoke, his voice carried an authority that neither Lisa nor Dr. Morgan had heard before. The voice of someone who had spent decades uncovering the truth in situations where people had worked very hard to hide it. "Dr. Morgan, I need to inform you that everything my wife has told you about our marriage during these sessions has been a deliberate fabrication designed to create documentation that would support her divorce case," David said, his tone professional and matter-of-fact. "Lisa has been having an affair with her personal trainer for the past 8 months, and these therapy sessions are part of an elaborate scheme to portray me as an emotionally abusive husband while she prepares to file for divorce." Lisa's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, her carefully practiced responses completely inadequate for this unexpected turn of events. She looked desperately at Dr. Morgan, seeking some kind of support or intervention that might salvage the situation, but the therapist was staring at David with a mixture of confusion and growing alarm. "That's absolutely ridiculous," Lisa finally managed to say, her voice higher than usual and lacking the controlled emotion she had displayed moments earlier. "David, you're having some kind of breakdown. Dr. Morgan, this is exactly the kind of paranoid behavior I've been trying to tell you about. He's completely delusional." Amanda pulled out a small digital recorder and placed it on the table next to David's photographs. "Mrs. Thompson, before you continue with that narrative, you should know that we have extensive documentation of your affair with Kevin Walsh, including video evidence from cameras installed in your home, financial records showing your transfer of marital assets to secret accounts, and recordings of conversations between you and Mr. Walsh planning this deception." The silence that followed Amanda's statement was deafening. Lisa's face went through a series of expressions as she processed the enormity of what had just been revealed. Not only had David discovered her affair, but he had been documenting everything, building a case against her while she thought she was successfully manipulating him into appearing unstable and defensive. Dr. Morgan cleared her throat nervously, clearly recognizing that her role in this situation was far more complicated than she had realized. "Mr. Thompson, if you suspected marital problems, the appropriate response would have been to discuss them honestly in therapy, not to conduct surveillance on your wife. What you're describing sounds like a serious violation of privacy." David turned the first photograph face up, revealing a clear image of Lisa and Kevin in an intimate embrace in what was obviously David and Lisa's bedroom. The timestamp in the corner showed the date and time, proving that the encounter had taken place just 2 days before their previous therapy session, during which Lisa had tearfully described feeling emotionally abandoned by her husband. "Dr. Morgan, I'm a licensed private investigator with over 20 years of experience in surveillance and evidence gathering," David explained calmly. "Every camera installed in my home was placed in accordance with Arizona state law, and since it's my primary residence, I had every legal right to document what was happening on my property. What I discovered wasn't just an affair, but a criminal conspiracy to commit fraud." Amanda opened her legal folder and removed a document that she handed to Dr. Morgan. This is a formal notification that your therapy notes and any recommendations you've made regarding this couple are now part of an ongoing legal investigation. Mrs. Thompson and her accomplice have been using your professional services to create false documentation of domestic abuse allegations, which constitutes fraud and could potentially implicate you as an unwitting participant in their scheme. Lisa suddenly stood up, her composure completely shattered as she realized how thoroughly her plan had been exposed. This is insane. David, you can't seriously think anyone will believe this elaborate conspiracy theory. You've obviously become obsessed with the idea that I'm cheating, and now you're trying to destroy my reputation because you can't handle the fact that our marriage is falling apart. David turned over the second photograph, this one showing Lisa and Kevin examining documents spread across the kitchen table. Even from the camera's position, it was possible to see that they were reviewing what appeared to be financial statements and legal papers. The timestamp showed this meeting had taken place just 3 days earlier, while David was supposedly at work. Lisa, this photograph shows you and Kevin reviewing divorce attorney's contact information and discussing strategies for maximizing your settlement while minimizing my access to marital assets, David said, his voice remaining steady, despite the emotional weight of what he was revealing. Would you like me to play the audio recording of that conversation? Or would you prefer to continue denying what we all know is true? Dr. Morgan was studying the documents Amanda had given her, her face growing increasingly pale as she realized the implications of what she was reading. If David's allegations were accurate, she had been manipulated into participating in what amounted to a fraud scheme, potentially putting her professional license and reputation at serious risk. Mrs. Thompson, Dr. Morgan said carefully, if there's any truth to these allegations, I need you to understand that providing false information during therapy sessions constitutes a serious breach of the therapeutic process. I'm going to need to review all of our previous sessions in light of this new information. Lisa looked frantically between Dr. Morgan and Amanda, clearly recognizing that her carefully constructed plan was collapsing around her. The persona she had crafted during the therapy sessions, the vulnerable wife struggling with an emotionally distant husband, was completely incompatible with the calculating woman who had been orchestrating an elaborate deception for months. You don't understand, Lisa said desperately, turning to address Dr. Morgan directly. David has become completely paranoid and controlling. He's been monitoring my every move, violating my privacy, and now he's trying to turn my legitimate concerns about our marriage into some kind of criminal conspiracy. This is exactly the kind of manipulative behavior I've been trying to tell you about. Amanda placed a small digital device on the table and pressed a button. Lisa's voice filled the room, but instead of the carefully modulated tones she had used during therapy sessions, this recording captured her speaking freely to Kevin during one of their planning meetings. The therapist is completely buying into the emotional abuse angle, Lisa's recorded voice said clearly. I just need to keep pushing the story about David being unstable and controlling. By the time we're done, he'll be lucky to get supervised visitation, let alone half the assets. Dr. Morgan has already suggested that I might need to consider my safety, which is perfect for the restraining order we discussed. The effect of hearing her own words was devastating. Lisa sank back into her chair, all pretense of innocence abandoned as she realized that David had not only discovered her affair, but had been documenting her planning sessions with Kevin. Every strategy they had developed, every lie they had crafted, every manipulation they had planned had been recorded and would now be used against her. Kevin's voice joined the recording, his tone casual and confident as he discussed their plans. Once we get the therapist's recommendation that the marriage is irreparable due to David's psychological issues, your divorce attorney can use that to argue for maximum alimony. The guy's a complete pushover, so this should be easy money. Just keep playing the victim for a few more sessions. Dr. Morgan's professional composure finally cracked completely as she realized how thoroughly she had been manipulated. Her therapeutic recommendations, her professional judgment, her assessment of David's mental state had all been based on elaborate lies designed to support a fraudulent divorce case. The implications for her career and reputation were staggering. Mr. Thompson, Dr. Morgan said quietly, I owe you a sincere apology. If these recordings are authentic, then I've been grossly manipulated, and my professional judgment has been compromised by false information. This is an unprecedented situation in my practice. David turned over a third photograph, this one showing Kevin removing equipment from what appeared to be a gym bag. But the equipment wasn't exercise-related. Instead, the image clearly showed makeup and what appeared to be stage props designed to create the appearance of bruises and injuries. This photograph was taken last Tuesday, the day before our previous therapy session, David explained calmly. It shows Kevin Walsh helping Lisa create fake bruises that she planned to claim were the result of physical abuse on my part. You'll notice in your notes from that session that Lisa mentioned being afraid of my temper and implied that I had been physically intimidating, but she was careful not to make direct accusations that would require immediate reporting to authorities. Amanda removed another document from her folder and placed it on the table. We've also uncovered evidence that Mr. Walsh has participated in similar schemes with at least 3 other married clients over the past 5 years. He appears to specialize in targeting wealthy women who are unhappy in their marriages and helping them orchestrate elaborate divorce fraud cases. Lisa's breathing became rapid and shallow as the full scope of her exposure became clear. Not only had David discovered her affair and documented her deception, but he had apparently uncovered Kevin's history of similar crimes. The man she had trusted with her future, the person who had convinced her that David was weak and easily manipulated, had apparently been using her just as he had used other women before her. "This can't be happening," Lisa whispered, more to herself than to anyone else in the room. "David, you have to understand. I never meant for things to go this far. It started as just a professional relationship with Kevin, and then when our marriage started having problems, he was just someone to talk to." David's expression remained impassive as he responded to his wife's attempt to minimize her actions. "Lisa, our marriage didn't start having problems. You created problems in our marriage as justification for your affair and your fraud scheme. The hidden cameras captured you and Kevin laughing about how easy it was to manipulate the stupid husband who paid for everything while you planned to take him for every penny he had." Amanda consulted her notes and addressed Dr. Morgan directly. "Doctor, we're going to need copies of all your session notes and any recommendations you've made regarding this couple. They'll be crucial evidence in both the divorce proceedings and the criminal case we're preparing against Mrs. Thompson and Mr. Walsh." The mention of criminal charges seemed to snap Lisa back to full awareness of her situation. "Criminal charges? David, you can't be serious. We're married. This is a personal matter between us, not some kind of criminal conspiracy. Yes, I made mistakes, but that doesn't make me a criminal." David opened his folder again and removed a thick stack of financial documents. "Lisa, you've systematically stolen $43,000 from our joint accounts over the past 6 months, transferred money to accounts I didn't know existed, and used our credit cards to pay for services related to your affair and your divorce planning. That's theft, fraud, and conspiracy. The fact that we're married doesn't make those actions legal." Dr. Morgan stood up abruptly, clearly recognizing that she needed to distance herself from a situation that could seriously damage her professional standing. "I'm going to need to consult with my own attorney about my role in this situation. Mrs. Thompson, Mr. Thompson, I'm suspending our therapy relationship immediately, and I'll be cooperating fully with any legal investigation into these allegations." Lisa turned to David with desperation replacing her earlier defiance. "David, please. We can work this out between us. I know I've made terrible mistakes, but we don't need to involve lawyers and courts and criminal charges. We can handle this privately, can't we? After 8 years of marriage, don't I deserve at least that much consideration?" Amanda answered before David could respond. "Mrs. Thompson, the time for private resolution passed when you decided to commit fraud and involve innocent third parties like Dr. Morgan in your scheme. You've created a legal situation that requires legal remedies. My client is prepared to be reasonable in settlement discussions, but first you need to understand the full extent of your legal exposure." David finally showed the first sign of emotion since Amanda had arrived, his voice carrying a note of sadness as he addressed the woman he had once loved completely. "Lisa, I would have given you anything you wanted. If you had come to me honestly and said you wanted a divorce, I would have been generous. If you had told me you were unhappy, I would have done everything possible to fix our problems. Instead, you chose to lie, cheat, steal, and try to destroy my reputation while robbing me blind." The weight of David's words seemed to crush the last of Lisa's resistance. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking as she finally grasped the magnitude of what she had lost through her greed and deception. The man who had loved her unconditionally, who had supported her dreams and trusted her completely, was now looking at her with the cold professionalism of someone documenting evidence for a criminal case. Amanda began packing her documents back into her briefcase, her business in Dr. Morgan's office nearly complete. "Mr. Thompson, I think we've accomplished what we came here to do. Mrs. Thompson now understands that we have comprehensive evidence of her fraud scheme, and Dr. Morgan understands that her professional notes were obtained under false pretenses." As the reality of her situation fully settled in, Lisa looked up at David with tears streaming down her face. "How long have you known? How long have you been planning this?" David's answer was quiet but decisive. "I've known about your affair for 3 weeks. I've been documenting everything since the day I overheard your phone conversation with Kevin. Every therapy session, every lie you told, every dollar you stole, every strategy you planned with your accomplice. I gave you multiple opportunities, to be honest with me, but you chose to double down on deception every single time." The silence that followed David's revelation stretched uncomfortably as everyone in the room processed the implications of what had just occurred. Lisa's elaborate scheme had not only been exposed but had been turned against her, transforming her from the victim she had pretended to be into the defendant in a criminal case that could destroy her life and reputation completely. 3 days later, David found himself sitting in the elegant conference room of Foster & Associates, watching Amanda spread out documents across the polished mahogany table like a general planning a complex military campaign. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating downtown Phoenix's skyline and casting everything in sharp relief, much like the clarity that had emerged from the chaos of the previous week. The transformation in David's demeanor was remarkable. Gone was the hesitant, apologetic man who had sat through weeks of therapy sessions accepting blame for problems he hadn't created. In his place sat someone who moved with purpose and spoke with the confidence that comes from finally holding all the cards in a game where he had been unknowingly playing at a severe disadvantage. Amanda looked up from her papers, her expression serious but satisfied. "David, I have to say, in 25 years of family law, I've rarely seen such comprehensive documentation of marital fraud. Your background in investigation work certainly paid off here. Lisa and Kevin have left us with enough evidence to pursue both criminal charges and a civil case that should recover everything they've taken, plus substantial damages." The irony wasn't lost on David that the skills he had developed catching other people's spouses and affairs had ultimately saved him from becoming the victim of his own wife's elaborate deception. Every technique he had used to help clients uncover the truth about their marriages had been turned inward, revealing a level of betrayal that went far beyond simple infidelity. His phone buzzed constantly with text messages from Lisa, each one more desperate than the last. She had been trying to reach him since leaving Dr. Morgan's office, alternating between tearful apologies and angry accusations. But David had instructed Amanda to handle all communication going forward. There would be no more private conversations, no more opportunities for manipulation, no more chances for Lisa to spin another story designed to make him question his own judgment. Kevin Walsh, meanwhile, had apparently disappeared entirely. His personal training business had been hastily shut down, his apartment abandoned, and his phone disconnected. Amanda's investigation had revealed that this was his standard operating procedure when one of his schemes was exposed. He would simply vanish, leaving his accomplice to face the consequences alone while he moved to a new city and began targeting fresh victims. "The financial recovery should be straightforward," Amanda continued, pointing to a spreadsheet that detailed every fraudulent transaction Lisa had made. "We can trace every penny she moved to her secret accounts, plus we have documentation of payments made to Kevin for services that were clearly not personal training. The credit card charges for the divorce attorneys she consulted, the payments to a private investigator she hired to dig up dirt on you, even the costs for the theatrical makeup Kevin used to create fake bruises." David studied the numbers, each line item representing another layer of betrayal he was still processing. The woman he had loved and trusted had been systematically planning his destruction, while sleeping beside him every night, sharing meals with him, accepting his support for her business ventures, and allowing him to believe they were working through normal marital difficulties. The private investigator Lisa had hired was perhaps the most insulting discovery of all. While David was attending therapy sessions trying to understand what was wrong with their relationship, Lisa was paying someone to follow him, hoping to find evidence of infidelity or other behavior that could be used against him in divorce proceedings. The investigator's report, which Amanda had subpoenaed, contained detailed observations of David's mundane daily routine, his visits to the office, his occasional dinners with colleagues, and his complete lack of suspicious activity. "What about Dr. Morgan?" David asked, genuinely concerned about the therapist who had been manipulated as thoroughly as he had been. "She seems like a decent person who got caught up in something she didn't understand." Amanda's expression softened slightly. "Dr. Morgan is cooperating fully with our investigation, and I don't think she'll face any professional consequences beyond having to explain to her licensing board how she was deceived. She's actually been helpful in documenting the specific lies Lisa told during sessions, which strengthens our fraud case considerably." The revelation of Lisa's deception had sent shockwaves through their social circle in Phoenix. Word had spread quickly through the tight-knit community of wedding planners, event coordinators, and society figures who had known them as a couple. Many of their mutual friends were struggling to reconcile the Lisa they thought they knew with the person capable of such elaborate manipulation and fraud. David's sister Rachel had driven down from Flagstaff as soon as she heard what had happened, bringing with her the kind of protective fury that only family can muster. She had never particularly liked Lisa, finding her too polished and socially ambitious. But even Rachel had been shocked by the extent of the deception that had been uncovered. "I always thought she was a little too perfect," Rachel had said, the night before, as they sat on David's patio overlooking the city lights. "The way she had an answer for everything, always knew exactly what to say in every situation. But I figured you were happy, so I kept my opinions to myself. I should have trusted my instincts." David had spent years defending Lisa to family members who questioned her motivations or found her difficult to connect with on a personal level. Now he was forced to wonder how many people had seen warning signs that he had missed or ignored in his determination to believe in the woman he had married. The house in Sunset Hills felt different now, contaminated by the knowledge of what had taken place within its walls. Every room held memories that had been revealed as lies. Every corner contained evidence of betrayal that David was still uncovering. The home gym where Lisa and Kevin had conducted their affair had been dismantled completely, the equipment donated to a local charity that helped domestic violence survivors get back on their feet. Amanda interrupted his thoughts by sliding a document across the table. "This is the formal settlement offer we're presenting to Lisa's attorney. Given the strength of our evidence, I expect them to accept rather than risk going to trial, but we need to be prepared for any response." The terms were harsh but fair, considering the circumstances. Lisa would return every penny she had stolen, forfeit any claim to alimony, and accept a property division that heavily favored David as compensation for her fraud. In exchange, David would agree not to pursue criminal charges that could result in significant jail time and a permanent criminal record that would destroy her business and reputation completely. "She won't like it," David observed, scanning the legal language that would effectively end their marriage and punish Lisa for her deception. "But she doesn't have much choice, does she?" Amanda shook her head grimly. "The evidence is overwhelming, and her attorney knows it. Lisa's only hope of avoiding criminal prosecution is to accept these terms and hope that her reputation in the wedding planning business can somehow survive the scandal." The scandal was already having its effect on Lisa's carefully built career. Several high-profile clients had quietly canceled their contracts after word spread about the fraud investigation, unwilling to risk having their special events associated with someone facing potential criminal charges. The social media presence Lisa had cultivated so carefully was being dismantled as former clients and vendors distanced themselves from the controversy. David felt no satisfaction in Lisa's professional destruction, only a deep sadness that things had reached this point. If she had simply asked for a divorce honestly, he would have been generous. If she had admitted to the affair and asked for forgiveness, he would have at least considered reconciliation. Instead, she had chosen a path that made any peaceful resolution impossible. His phone rang, and Amanda answered it after checking the caller ID. It was Lisa's attorney, undoubtedly calling to discuss the settlement terms and gauge whether there was any room for negotiation. Amanda's side of the conversation was brief and professional, confirming details and establishing timelines for response. They want to meet tomorrow, Amanda reported after ending the call. Lisa's attorney is trying to negotiate better terms, but I made it clear that our offer is final. She either accepts these conditions or faces criminal prosecution with no guarantee of a favorable plea deal. The finality of it all was settling over David like dust after an explosion. 8 years of marriage, countless shared experiences, plans for a future together, all of it reduced to legal documents and financial calculations. The woman he had awakened beside that morning just 2 weeks ago was now essentially a stranger facing the consequences of choices that had destroyed everything they had built together. Amanda began gathering her documents, preparing for the legal battles that lay ahead. David, I want you to understand that this process is going to be emotionally difficult, even though we have a strong case. Ending a marriage is never easy, especially under these circumstances. You might want to consider counseling with someone other than Dr. Morgan, just to help you process everything that's happened. The suggestion of therapy struck David as ironically appropriate, given that his wife's abuse of the therapeutic process was what had exposed her entire scheme. But Amanda was right that he would need help working through the betrayal, the anger, and the grief that came with discovering that his marriage had been built on lies. As he left Amanda's office and walked through downtown Phoenix toward the parking garage where he had left his car, David felt the weight of freedom beginning to replace the burden of deception. For the first time in months, he wasn't wondering what Lisa was really doing, wasn't questioning his own perceptions, wasn't trying to understand problems that had never actually existed. The afternoon sun was intense, typical for Phoenix in late spring, but David found himself appreciating the harsh clarity of the desert light. Everything looked different when you could see it clearly, when the shadows and distortions that had been clouding your vision were finally stripped away. His phone buzzed with another text from Lisa, this one begging him to call her so they could discuss the situation privately, away from lawyers and legal threats. David deleted the message without reading it completely, understanding now that private discussions with Lisa were exactly what had gotten him into this situation in the first place. Every conversation would be an opportunity for manipulation. Every emotional appeal another attempt to cloud his judgment and make him question what he knew to be true. The drive home through the familiar streets of Phoenix felt like traveling through a city he was seeing for the first time. Places where he and Lisa had shared meals, attended events, built memories together were revealed as stages for a performance he hadn't realized was taking place. The life he thought they had been living together had been an elaborate fiction designed to keep him compliant while she planned his destruction. But as painful as the revelation had been, David was beginning to recognize that it had also freed him from a prison he hadn't known he was in. The constant tension he had attributed to normal marital stress, the feeling that he was always somehow failing to meet Lisa's expectations, the sense that he was walking on eggshells without understanding. Why, all of it now made perfect sense. He hadn't been failing as a husband, he had been succeeding as a victim. 6 weeks after the confrontation in Dr. Morgan's office, David stood in the reception area of his own private investigation firm, watching through the window as Lisa's silver BMW pulled into the parking lot of the adjacent coffee shop. She had been calling Amanda's office daily, begging for a meeting, claiming she had new information that would change everything. Against his better judgment and Amanda's advice, David had finally agreed to see her one last time, but only in a public place with witnesses nearby. The woman who walked into Morning Brew looked nothing like the polished, confident person who had once commanded attention at Phoenix's most exclusive social events. Lisa's designer clothes hung loosely on her frame, her usually perfect hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and the dark circles under her eyes suggested she hadn't been sleeping well. The transformation was so complete that David almost felt sorry for her, until he remembered the recordings of her laughing with Kevin about how easy it was to manipulate her stupid husband. She spotted him immediately and approached his corner table with the hesitant steps of someone who wasn't sure of their welcome. David gestured to the chair across from him, but didn't stand or offer any of the courtesies he would have automatically extended just 2 months earlier. The distance between them felt like an ocean, though they were separated by less than 3 feet of scarred wooden table. David, thank you for agreeing to see me, Lisa began, her voice barely above a whisper. I know I don't deserve any consideration from you, but there are things you need to know about Kevin. Things I didn't understand until after everything fell apart. David sipped his coffee and studied her face, noting the genuine distress that seemed to radiate from her. After 20 years of reading people professionally, He could distinguish between authentic emotion and calculated performance, and what he saw across the table appeared to be real fear rather than another manipulation attempt. "I'm listening," he said simply, offering no encouragement or warmth, just the basic courtesy of attention. Lisa glanced around the coffee shop nervously before leaning forward and speaking in urgent, hushed tones. "Kevin didn't just disappear after everything came out. He contacted me 3 days ago, demanding money to keep quiet about certain details of our relationship. He has recordings, David, conversations where I said terrible things about you that go beyond anything that came out in the investigation." The revelation didn't surprise David as much as it might have a few months earlier. His research into Kevin's background had revealed a pattern of behavior that suggested the man was essentially a professional predator who specialized in exploiting wealthy women's vulnerabilities. Blackmail seemed like a natural extension of his business model. "What kind of recordings?" David asked, maintaining his neutral tone despite his curiosity about what additional depths Lisa's betrayal might have reached. Lisa's face flushed, with shame as she struggled to find words. "He recorded some of our more intimate conversations, times when I was angry or frustrated about our marriage. I said things about wanting you to have an accident, about how much easier my life would be if you just disappeared. I was venting, David, saying horrible things I didn't mean, but if those recordings ever become public..." The implications hung in the air between them. If Kevin had evidence of Lisa discussing harm coming to her husband, it could transform a fraud case into something much more serious. It would also provide Kevin with leverage to extract money from Lisa for years to come, turning her into a permanent victim of her own criminal choices. "How much does he want?" David asked, genuinely curious about the price Kevin had put on his silence. $50,000 to start, then $10,000 a month for what he calls ongoing discretion, Lisa replied, her voice breaking slightly. "David, I don't have that kind of money anymore. My business is destroyed, my reputation is ruined, and most of my assets are frozen pending the divorce settlement. I can't pay him, but I can't afford to have those recordings made public either." David found himself in the strange position of almost feeling sympathy for the woman who had tried to destroy his life. Almost, but not quite. The suffering Lisa was experiencing was entirely the result of choices she had made, decisions to lie, cheat, steal, and conspire against the person who had loved her most. Kevin's blackmail was simply another consequence of the path she had chosen. "Why are you telling me this?" David asked. "What exactly do you expect me to do about Kevin's demands?" Lisa looked at him with desperate hope, as if he might somehow rescue her from the mess she had created. "You still have contacts in law enforcement, don't you? People who could help deal with Kevin before this gets even worse? I know I have no right to ask for your help, but if those recordings become public, they'll hurt both of us." Naivrain of Lisa asking for David's protection after spending months plotting his destruction was almost overwhelming. She had systematically worked to portray him as unstable, abusive, and dangerous, but now she wanted him to use his professional connections to save her from the consequences of her own criminal behavior. David's phone buzzed with a text message, and he glanced down to see a note from Amanda confirming that Lisa's attorney had formally accepted their settlement terms. The divorce would be finalized within 30 days, the financial restitution would begin immediately, and Lisa would have no further claim on David's assets or income. The legal nightmare was essentially over. "Lisa, the divorce papers were signed an hour ago," David said quietly. "In 30 days, we'll be legally strangers. Your problems with Kevin are your problems to solve. I'm not going to rescue you from a situation you created by trying to destroy me." The finality in David's voice seemed to crush the last of Lisa's hope. She sat back in her chair as if physically struck, finally understanding that the man she had manipulated and betrayed was not going to save her from the predator she had chosen as her accomplice. "I know you hate me," Lisa said, tears beginning to flow down her cheeks. "I know I've done terrible things that can never be forgiven. But David, we were married for 8 years. Doesn't that count for something? Can't you find it in your heart to help me this one last time?" David studied, her face searching for any trace of the woman he had fallen in love with 9 years earlier. The intelligence was still there, and the beauty. But everything else had been revealed as carefully constructed facade designed to hide someone capable of breathtaking selfishness and cruelty. "You're right that we were married for 8 years, David replied slowly. But I'm beginning to understand that I was married to someone who never actually existed. The woman I loved was a character you played. And now I'm supposed to risk my safety and reputation to help the actress who was lying to me the entire time? Lisa's sobbing intensified, drawing concerned glances from other customers in the coffee shop. David, please, I'm begging you. I know I don't deserve your help, but I'm scared. Kevin is dangerous, and I think he might actually hurt me if I don't pay him what he wants. For a moment, David felt the old instinct to comfort her, to fix her problems, and make everything better. It was the same impulse that had led him to support her business ventures, defend her to his family, and believe her lies about their marriage difficulties. But the recordings of her laughing about manipulating her stupid husband had killed that instinct permanently. Lisa, if you're genuinely afraid that Kevin might hurt you, call the police, David said, standing up and gathering his jacket. File a report about the blackmail. Show them whatever evidence you have, and let law enforcement handle it. But don't ask me to get involved in cleaning up the mess you made by conspiring with a criminal. As David walked toward the door, Lisa called out to him one last time. David, what if I told you I still love you? What if I said I would do anything to make this right between us? David paused at the door and turned back to look at her one final time. Lisa, if you had loved me, none of this would have happened. Love doesn't plot to destroy the person it claims to care about. What you're feeling now isn't love. It's panic, because you're finally facing the consequences of your choices without anyone to blame but yourself. The drive back to his office gave David time to process the encounter and confirm what he had suspected since the day everything was revealed. Lisa was exactly who she had always been. He had simply been too trusting to see it clearly. The woman crying in the coffee shop wasn't a different person from the one who had planned his destruction. She was the same person dealing with the fact that her plans had failed catastrophically. Amanda was waiting in his office when he returned, a satisfied smile on her face as she reviewed the final divorce documents. It's over, David. Lisa signed everything. The financial transfers are being processed, and you're officially free to start rebuilding your life without looking over your shoulder. David settled into his desk chair and looked out at the Phoenix skyline, feeling lighter than he had in months. The woman who had tried to destroy him was now begging for his help. The accomplice who had targeted him was now targeting her, and the life he thought he had lost was revealed to have been an illusion that was better left behind. Amanda, I think it's time to close this chapter completely, David said. Whatever happens between Lisa and Kevin from this point forward is none of my concern. I'm done being part of their story. 18 months later, David stood on the wraparound porch of his new home in Scottsdale, watching the sunrise paint, the desert mountains in shades of gold and crimson. The 2-story adobe house was smaller than the Sunset Hills property he had shared with Lisa, but every square foot belonged entirely to him, unmarked by memories of betrayal or contaminated by the presence of people who had pretended to love him while planning his destruction. The morning routine had become a cherished ritual. Coffee on the porch, 20 minutes of reading the news, then a short drive to the expanded offices of Thompson Investigations, the business that had not only saved him from Lisa's scheme but had grown dramatically as word spread about his successful exposure of a complex fraud case. Clients who needed someone capable of uncovering elaborate deceptions were willing to pay premium rates for David's expertise. His phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer Clark, the forensic accountant he had met 6 months earlier during a corporate fraud investigation. Their relationship had developed slowly and carefully, built on mutual respect and genuine compatibility, rather than the intense passion that had characterized his relationship with Lisa. Jennifer was intelligent, independent, and refreshingly honest about her thoughts and feelings, qualities David had learned to value above all others. Looking forward to dinner tonight, her message read. The new restaurant in Old Town gets great reviews, and I promise not to analyze their bookkeeping practices unless the service is terrible. David smiled as he typed his response, appreciating Jennifer's dry humor and the way she could make him laugh without effort. Their relationship was still new enough to feel exciting, but comfortable enough that he could envision a genuine future together, something he hadn't been able to imagine with anyone since his divorce was finalized. The contrast between Jennifer and Lisa was striking in ways that went beyond their obvious differences in appearance and profession. Where Lisa had been charming and socially ambitious, Jennifer was thoughtful and genuinely accomplished. Where Lisa had required constant attention and validation, Jennifer was secure in her own worth and capabilities. Most importantly, where Lisa had seen David as a resource to be exploited, Jennifer valued him as a partner and equal. The drive to his office took him through downtown Phoenix, past the building where Dr. Morgan still practiced therapy, past the coffee shop where Lisa had begged for his help with Kevin's blackmail demands, past the courthouse where their divorce had been finalized with Lisa accepting terms that left her with minimal assets and no ongoing claim to David's income or property. Amanda Foster had become more than just his attorney. She had become a trusted friend whose advice extended beyond legal matters into personal territory. She had been the one to suggest that David might be ready to start dating again, and she had been right about Jennifer being someone worth pursuing when they had met during a professional consultation. "The best revenge is living well," Amanda had said during one of their monthly lunch meetings. "Lisa destroyed her own life trying to destroy yours, and now you get to build something better than what you had before." The aftermath of Lisa's scheme had been devastating for everyone involved except David. Kevin Walsh had eventually been arrested in Las Vegas after attempting the same fraud with a casino executive's wife, but not before extracting nearly $30,000 from Lisa through his blackmail operation. Lisa herself had been forced to file for bankruptcy after legal fees, restitution payments, and the complete collapse of her wedding planning business left her with insurmountable debts. Dr. Morgan had survived the professional review of her role in the case, but the experience had changed her approach to therapy dramatically. She now required extensive verification of claims made during sessions and had developed protocols to prevent future manipulation by clients with hidden agendas. The experience had made her a more cautious but ultimately more effective therapist. David's sister Rachel had been vindicated in her long-standing suspicions about Lisa, though she took no satisfaction in being right about something that had caused her brother such pain. She had become one of Jennifer's biggest supporters, appreciating the forensic accountant's straightforward personality and her obvious genuine affection for David. The offices of Thompson Investigations occupied the entire third floor of a modern building in Phoenix's financial district, a significant expansion from the small suite David had operated before his divorce. The business now employed 6 full-time investigators and 3 support staff, specializing in cases involving marital fraud, corporate espionage, and complex financial crimes. David's personal experience with elaborate deception had given him insights that proved invaluable to clients facing similar situations. He could recognize the subtle signs of manipulation, the carefully constructed lies, and the psychological tactics used by people who specialized in exploiting trust and affection for financial gain. The morning brought a new case consultation, with a prominent surgeon whose wife had been displaying behavior patterns that reminded David strongly of Lisa's actions during the months leading up to their divorce. The client's wife had suddenly become interested in fitness, hired an expensive personal trainer, started therapy to address communication problems in their marriage, and had been making unusual financial transactions that didn't align with her previous spending patterns. "Dr. Martinez, based on what you've described, I recommend we begin with financial surveillance to document any unusual activity, followed by discreet observation to verify your suspicions," David explained. During their meeting, "If your wife is planning something similar to what my ex-wife attempted, we'll have comprehensive evidence before she can complete whatever scheme she's developing." The consultation lasted 2 hours, during which David shared enough details of his own experience to help Dr. Martinez understand the sophistication of modern fraud schemes targeting wealthy spouses. The surgeon left with a clear plan of action, and the confidence that comes from knowing you're dealing with someone who truly understands the situation you're facing. Amanda stopped by the office during lunch, bringing news that Lisa had been evicted from her apartment and was apparently living with her mother in a modest neighborhood far from the affluent circles where she had once been a prominent figure. The information came from the private investigator Amanda used for asset verification in divorce cases, and she shared it not out of malice but as confirmation that David's decision to pursue full legal remedies had been justified. "She's working as a part-time receptionist at a medical clinic," Amanda reported. "The wedding planning business never recovered from the scandal, and she can't get bonded for any position involving financial responsibility because of the fraud conviction. Her mother is supporting her, but it's a very different life from what she was accustomed to." David felt no satisfaction in learning about Lisa's reduced circumstances, only a sense of closure that came from knowing the consequences of her actions had been thorough and appropriate. She had gambled everything on a scheme to destroy him and take his assets, and she had lost completely. The justice was poetic in its completeness. Jennifer arrived at the office promptly at 5 o'clock, looking professional in her Navy business suit but smiling with the warmth that had initially attracted David to her. Their dinner plans included trying the new Mediterranean restaurant in Old Town Scottsdale, followed by a concert at the Performing Arts Center where a jazz quartet was premiering new compositions. "How was your day?" Jennifer asked as they walked to the parking garage, her hand naturally finding his as they navigated the evening foot traffic. "Productive," David replied. "I helped someone avoid making the same mistakes I made, which always feels worthwhile." The evening was perfect, in the way that Arizona evenings can be, with clear skies and temperatures that made outdoor dining comfortable. As they sat on the restaurant's patio, sharing appetizers and discussing their respective work projects, David reflected on how different this relationship felt from his marriage to Lisa. There were no hidden agendas, no careful scripts designed to elicit specific responses, no sense that he was being evaluated or manipulated. Jennifer was exactly who she appeared to be, and she seemed to appreciate the same authenticity in him. Their conversations ranged from serious topics like their career ambitions to silly debates about the best pizza toppings, and everything felt natural and unforced. "David, can I ask you something personal?" Jennifer said as they waited for their entrees. "Do you ever worry that what happened with Lisa might make it hard for you to trust someone new completely?" The question was thoughtful and direct, typical of Jennifer's approach to important topics. David considered his answer carefully, wanting to be honest without burdening their relationship with unnecessary anxiety about his past experiences. "I think what happened with Lisa actually made me better at recognizing authenticity," David replied. "I spent years accepting explanations that didn't quite make sense and ignoring inconsistencies because I wanted to believe in what we had together. Now I pay attention to whether someone's words match their actions, and with you, they always do." Jennifer smiled, apparently satisfied with his response. "Good, because I'm not capable of the kind of elaborate deception Lisa managed. I'm terrible at lying, and I have no patience for games or manipulation. What you see is definitely what you get." As the evening progressed, David found himself thinking about the future in ways he hadn't since before his marriage to Lisa began deteriorating. He could envision traveling with Jennifer, building a life together based on mutual respect and shared values, maybe even starting a family if their relationship continued developing in its current positive direction. The concert was excellent, featuring original compositions that blended traditional jazz elements with contemporary influences. During the intermission, David noticed Lisa's former business partner across the lobby, someone who had distanced herself from Lisa when the fraud scandal broke. The woman nodded politely but didn't approach, respecting the boundaries that had been established when David's former life was dismantled and rebuilt. Driving home after the concert, Jennifer mentioned that her company had been asked to consult on a major fraud case involving a prominent Phoenix family. "It sounds like the kind of complex financial deception you specialize in uncovering. Would you be interested in collaborating if my firm gets the contract?" The possibility of working together professionally was appealing, representing another way their relationship could deepen beyond the personal connection they had already established. David had learned to value partnerships built on professional respect as much as emotional compatibility. Standing on his porch later that night, watching Jennifer drive away with plans to see each other again in 2 days, David felt the deep satisfaction that comes from a life rebuilt on solid foundations. Lisa's attempt to destroy him had ultimately freed him from a relationship based on lies and led him to someone whose honesty and integrity made genuine happiness possible. The desert stars were brilliant in the clear sky, and the silence was peaceful rather than lonely. David had learned to distinguish between solitude and isolation, between independence and abandonment. He was no longer the man who had sat in Dr. Morgan's office accepting blame for problems he hadn't created. He was someone who understood his own worth and wouldn't accept anything less than the authentic love and respect he was finally receiving from Jennifer. The future stretched ahead with possibilities that felt real rather than illusory, built on truth rather than carefully constructed deceptions. Lisa had tried to steal his life, but in the end, she had inadvertently given him something better than what he had lost. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.